Thank you so much, Ruchi. So welcome everyone. Good afternoon. So our first speaker is Dr. Ferishit, or she goes with the Angel, Dr. Angel. Okay. So Dr. Angel is a turfgrass pathologist at the University of Maryland. Her appointment includes research, extension, and teaching components. Her research focuses on the identification and integrated management of turfgrass diseases using both novel and traditional approaches, with the main goal of reducing chemical inputs in the turfgrass management. Her research areas include epidemiology, genetics of host resistance, nematology, and the application of AI in disease identification. Before starting her position at University of Maryland in 2022, she was a postdoctoral associate at North Dakota State University, where she also received her PhD in plant pathology. Thank you so much, Dr. Angel, and the floor is yours. Okay, you can get started.
Right, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. All right, I hope you guys are seeing my presenting view.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. All right, hello everyone. It's an honor to be here today. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about diseases that are important not only in the landscape and lawn sector, but also they could be issues sports turf and to some extent in golf courses too. So my talk might be a little bit more focused on lawn and landscape, but the management practices, signs and symptoms can be implemented in other turfgrass areas as well. All right, so these are the topics that we are going to cover today. So first, I want to give you a little bit of the introduction on when diseases happen, and you're going to see the disease triangle. I'm a pathologist. I'm under oath. I should show it anyway. I know probably many of you guys have seen it before, but we're going to start with a little bit of introduction about turf diseases or turfgrass diseases and when they happen. And then I have an image, which is a result of a survey, mainly in the Mid-Atlantic area, and the participants were in landscape sector managers, and to answer the question that what are the main and common diseases that they deal with. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about Rhizoctonia solani diseases, so brown patch and large patch. We'll talk about their similarities, their differences, signs and symptoms of the disease, and also the management, cultural, chemical, and a little bit of a research-based strategies that are recommended. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about gray leaf spot disease, which could be also important on warm season and cool season turf species. All right. Probably many of you guys have seen this before, but just to refresh your memory. So pathogens that can affect turfgrass or any other crops can be fungi, nematodes, bacteria, viruses, and depending on which host and even within the turfgrass, what species and cultivar we are managing, those pathogens can be different. But mainly we deal with fungi and after that to some extent with nematodes. The second factor that we have to have for diseases to occur are favorable environment for the pathogen to grow, but not for the turfgrass. So as a rule of thumb, moisture or relative humidity is something that we almost always need with fungal pathogens. When it comes to temperature, some fungal pathogens are more adapted to cooler temperatures, some of them to warmer temperatures, and some of them are stronger to a wide range of temperatures, like dauber spot, which can happen like here in the Mid-Atlantic region. It can happen anywhere between April all the way to September, October. And then we always have to have a susceptible host. Thank goodness for a pathologist. Turfgrass species, almost all of them are susceptible to multiple diseases. So this is the kind of traditional disease triangle, but more recently, not very recently, but there's another component that researchers and pathologists believe that it's also important for disease to happen. And that would be time, right? So when we have the pathogen, environment, and susceptible hosts, we need to have them and have this combination for a period of time for disease to occur. So for example, when it comes to gray leaf spot, the pathogen requires at least 10 to 12 hours of leaf wetness for the spores to be able to germinate and enter the plant and cause disease. All right, so I'm going to briefly talk about two terms that I'm going to refer back to them frequently during my talk. So I just want to make sure that we all know what is the exact definition and difference between them. So symptoms are basically the reaction of the plant to the pathogen and disease. And depending on the disease or depending on the pathogen that you're dealing with, those symptoms are different. It could be a patch, it could be a very small lesion on the leaf, it could be a small spot or a ring. So different types, but we are not seeing any part of the pathogen, we are seeing the reaction of the plant. On the other hand, we have signs. So sign is when we actually see structures of the pathogen on the turf stand or under a microscope. So depending on which pathogen we're talking about, it could be spores, it could be mycelium. So mycelium are thread-like structures of many fungi that is the growing structure of them. So for example, when we talk about brown patch or dark spot or Pythium blight, when it's humid out there and we have dew on the canopy, we will be able to see mycelium actively and kind of like a white grayish color on the canopy. And then for some other diseases or pathogens, for example, gray leaf spot pathogen, Irregular, produces spores, which is kind of the characteristics of that pathogen. So for us pathologists, we use not only symptoms, but also signs of those pathogens to be able to verify that what is the problem that is causing that symptoms. So this is like kind of shows the answer of the landscape people. When I asked this question as a part of a survey that what are the common and challenging lawn diseases that you deal with? So the number of the green symbols that you see, those are the number of the people who voted for or chose that a specific disease. So brown patch probably was their number one, and then red thread, following by that powdery mildew, which I would say it's a common one. I don't know how challenging it would be. Based on my experience, and barely requires chemical applications or like very heavy management practices, and normally it goes away on this. You have a susceptible cultivar and then shaded area. So that was kind of the reason that I developed this presentation in the first place, that in many of the talks, when I asked what is your common and challenging disease, brown patch comes up. So gray leaf spot might not be probably number one issue at this point, probably in 1990s it was. But I've been seeing and hearing a lot from people that they're getting gray leaf spot on tall fescue, which it wasn't a very major host for this pathogen, but it seems that the pathogen is kind of adapting to tall fescue and it's becoming an issue. So, and definitely gray leaf spot is an issue on St. Augustine grass. So I kind of wanted to cover that as one of the common diseases that we can see on landscape turf. All right, so let's start with brown patch and large patch. So both of these diseases are caused by the same species of the pathogen, Rhizoctonia solani. So probably the major difference that we can think about is that brown patch occurs on cool season grass species like Kentucky bluegrass, to some extent tall fescue, and we also have it on creeping bent grass when it comes to golf courses. Perennial ryegrass can also get affected. But large patch affects warm season grasses. Mainly when we talk about it, Bermuda grass and zoysia grass are probably number one hosts for Rhizoctonia solani when it comes to large patch. Yellow patch is also another Rhizoctonia disease. It's caused by a different species. We are not going to cover it in this talk because it's not mainly an issue when it comes to landscape and lawn turf. All right, so brown patch identification, the first step to take when you see a stand that has a lot of yellowing and patches is to look at the leaf tissue very closely, right? So when it comes to lesions on the leaf surface, you normally see irregular tan lesions with darker brown borders. They could be larger or smaller in size. But whenever you see such a symptom on the stand, try to kind of get closer and check the leaves closely and see if you have lesions that resemble this type of tan inside darker brown borders. So not related to this talk, but I always do comparisons between diseases to kind of help practitioners to do identification. So probably Pythium blight is something that is another disease that happens at the same time of the year, and the way to kind of tell them apart when you're just looking at the stand is the type of the lesions that you see on the leaves are different than each other. So normally with Pythium blight, you wouldn't see this tan inside darker brown border. You normally see just kind of mushy type of lesions, and then the stand looks kind of greasy, or the lesions kind of look greasy rather than the dry appearance of the lesions when it comes to brown patch. So when it's early in the morning or when it's dew on the canopy, you might be able to see the sign of the pathogen, which is the Mycelium or this cottony white structures growing on the canopy. And then, but you can see also, you can see this for Pythium blight too. When we receive samples from practitioners, we check them mycelium under the microscope. And if we are able to see this specific characteristic, which is a 90-degree angle mycelium, then we can tell if it's Rhizoctonia that is causing brown patch. And then Pythium blight has its own characteristics, like there is no cell wall in the mycelium, so we can kind of tell them apart for sure when we receive samples and check them under the microscope. So when it comes to favorable conditions for this disease, we normally see it kind of in the middle of the summer when it's hot and humid. So here in Maryland, it can start anywhere between mid to late June and then all the way to September. Right now, we still have the symptoms on our tall fescue at the turf farm. So it normally occurs like in the hot and humid when we say, when the low temperatures is above 70 degrees Fahrenheit and high temperature is above 90. So this June to September would be probably a little bit different when we talk about different parts of the US, but hot and humid, that's the key to keep in mind. So when it comes to leaf wetness, which is basically water droplets on the turfgrass canopy, basically it needs like more than 10 hours of leaf wetness to be able to cause those lesions and symptoms that we saw. So when I teach my disease class, I always say or tell students that keep dew or anything that comes to watering, irrigation, or keeping the canopy wet as probably one of the #1 derivatives for diseases to happen, right? So when we want to manage diseases, we want to go opposite, right? So if you have been dealing with brown patch or many other foliar diseases, what to keep in mind is to reduce dew on the canopy. So late afternoon watering is not a good idea because then dew and leaf wetness stays on the canopy during the night, which is that 10 hours that the pathogen needs to get into the plant and cause the disease. So when we are talking about landscape area, lack of air movement and shade also can help that dew and water droplets to stay on the canopy. So anything that can help to improve that air movement could be definitely helpful in the management of the disease. So brown patch is one of those foliar diseases that can get worse with excessive nitrogen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this when we get to the management practices, but just keep in mind that we're talking about excessive nitrogen, not just regular fertilization that turf needs to be healthy and grow. If you want to cut nitrogen altogether, then we're kind of going opposite because turfgrass cannot grow well. And then it's going to be stressed and weak, and then like a lot of pathogens can affect it. Talking a little bit about large patch, it was formerly brown patch, so there was no difference between them except that one of them was on cool season and the other was on warm season turf. But then researchers saw that there are a lot of differences, not only in the timing that they happen, the species that they affect, but also the biology of the isolates of the pathogen. So that's why there are different like groups of the species that can cause brown patch, and some others can cause large patch. So we normally see large patch when turfgrass is going or coming out of dormancy. So normally in fall, when temperatures kind of decline to 70s or that neighborhood, and then well, definitely wet, cool weather is required. So if you have like a very dry fall or very dry spring, then it might be delayed a little bit. So normally zoysia grass is more susceptible, and if you get the disease on Bermuda grass, you can expect it to recover a little bit quicker and faster than zoysia grass. So for us here in Maryland and a little bit in the Mid-Atlantic area, we normally see large patch. So this photo, I took it from our turf farm on a Bermuda stand. And this was around April. So normally we see it April to late May, early June at most. And also the same patches kind of show up again in September and October. So when it comes to large patch, it can get worse if you have excessive thatch. Over irrigation, also you don't want to do it with none of them, not brown patch, not large patch. So this is kind of again an unwritten research point that low mowing heights it could be helpful when it come, or it couldn't be helpful when it comes to large patch or any other soil-borne diseases. So you kind of want to make sure that you're not cutting your turf too short so it cannot be healthy and grow well to be able to stand diseases like large patch or even a spring dead spot or summer patch. Excessive nitrogen can also be an issue, but we have a timing for it. So like for brown patch, we don't want to have excessive nitrogen like in the middle of the summer when disease is like active, and that's you have the highest chance to see the disease. But when it comes to large patch, you don't want to go with excessive nitrogen in fall and spring to get the disease worse. So if you want to list the differences that brown patch and large patch have, probably this would be our list. So they have different hosts when it comes to cool season, warm season. They occur at a different time of the year, like brown patch in the middle of the summer, but large patch in the shoulder seasons. They have distinct symptoms, which mainly is the size of the patch that you see. So in large patch, I mean, we turf pathologists, we could be a little bit more innovative with the names that we choose, but it's a large patch, so we call it large patch. So the size of the patches are a little bit larger in size when it comes to large patch. And there are different strains of the same species when we like check them more at the gene and molecular levels. And they actually have different control strategies. Like you might find some fungicides that can manage brown patch, but not really large patch, or their efficacy is a little bit different on these two diseases. All right, so if you want to talk about integrated management of these Rhizoctonia solani diseases, probably one of our #1 cultural practices would be irrigation and leaf wetness management. So any practice that you could do to reduce dew and leaf wetness on the canopy can be your #1 cultural practice for these diseases. So if you have a shaded area, you can kind of do pruning and then help sunlight to get inside the canopy. Some cultural practices are irrigation, water drainage, and probably I would recommend people to get to this stage, like a little bit deeper cultural practices if brown patch or large patch have been an issue for multiple years at the site that they're managing. So irrigation early in the morning can give that time to the canopy to get dry before the sun goes down. So most of the time with many diseases, it would be better to water infrequently but deeply, right? So in this case, like 4 to 6 inches of irrigation, but not really often. So thatch, especially when it comes to large patch, thatch could be one of the enemies for the turfgrass. So if you can keep it less than 0.5 inch, that would be ideal when it comes to cultural practices. Chemical application, normally for lawns, it's not really required unless, again, it's like a persistent issue and you are getting the disease years after years. And none of these cultural practices actually have been helpful to manage the disease. So I would like to introduce this publication from three universities, but University of Kentucky is the first like publishing. So chemical control of turfgrass diseases, it was updated in 2024, and it's a very great resource to find fungicides for different diseases. So they have a list. I think I do have, yeah, I do have this table, like this is for brown patch here. So you can find a list of fungicides and then a frac group, which helps you to rotate between the fungicides to avoid resistant development. And it has the efficacy and interval. So the good thing about this publication is it's based on research. So all the universities or many universities in the US, they do like fungicide trials each year. And then these authors kind of combine them and publish this based on many years of research in different parts of the US. So when you check this out, you can see like what is the fungicide, what is the efficacy. So like, for example, here we have multiple of them that are labeled for lawns, like Heritage, Propiconazole, which comes with different trade names, Cleary, and Velista. So I really recommend this when it gets to a point that you really need to do fungicide applications. So the other thing that I wanted to probably mention here is like Balaton is a fungicide that would work really good for large patch, but not really good for a brown patch. So again, publications like this would be really helpful because you can see what is the efficacy based on research trials rather than just like checking the label is number one. Always check the label. But like you might see both diseases on the label, but then when it comes to how effective it is, then that publication could be a really good resource. And sometimes for some of in the same publication, for some fungicides, you see letter L, and that means limited. So there is not much research done on this specific fungicide like Heritage Action when it comes to large patch. So this is one of the trials that we did for brown patch in 22 at the turf farm here in our program. So what I kind of want to bring out, I don't want to go through all the numbers and everything, is many times researchers have some chemicals that are experimental. They're not commercial, they're not registered, and sometimes they work really good. Like here in 22, we had this, so it's coded because it's still confidential, but then this is the summary of the disease at the end of the season. We had all these ratings like in July, August, September, and we kind of summarize it, and we call it AUDPC. So you can see this experimental fungicide that we had was kind of very good in the management of the disease. So the lower number means less disease. And these are promising in near future that they can get commercialized and be available for the practitioners. All right, so here is a little bit of a summary about different research-based recommendations for large patch and brown patch. So this one is about brown patch, and in this study, we wanted to see what is the role of microbial inoculants and fertilization for management of brown patch. So we did the work on bullseye, tall fescue, it was a home lawn, like 3-inch height. So I am not advertising for these products, it's just they happen to be part of a research project. So I'm just like reporting on the results that we got. So BioMD and BioFlex were the microbial inoculants that we use. And then we had a combination of those two with nitrogen fertilization. I applied them every 6 weeks. Based on like following the label, we watered them in right after application. Then we got data on a brown patch severity, which was percentage of the plots that were infected with the disease, quality of turfgrass, and also color. So this is the design that we had. I'm not going to go really deep into it. I just want to kind of show that we tested these products with fungicide application, like chemical fungicide application and without, because we wanted to see not only their effect on disease, but also on quality and color when there is no disease. So we had a different combination, like 100% nitrogen was half a pound per 1,000 square feet. And then we had only BioMD, and we had combination of BioMD with different percentage of that half a pound, like 25%, 50%, 75%, and 100%. When we had BioFlex, we didn't add any nitrogen because BioFlex already has some fertilizer in it. So we tested it as a standalone treatment. And then we repeated this map like 4 times to make sure that we get replicable data. So this is the results that we got for brown patch. So AUDPC, again, is the summary of the disease throughout the season. So when we have a higher bar, it means that we had more disease. And then here on the x-axis, we have different treatments that we have. So non-treated means that the plot didn't receive anything. And the orange color is fungicide, chemical fungicide applied, and then blue color is no fungicide applied. So this is kind of what we expect to see when it comes to biological control, that like we have generally less level of the disease when fungicide was applied compared to non-fungicide applied. So we didn't see any significant, statistically significant differences between the treatments when chemical fungicide was there, because the chemical fungicide could kind of suppress the disease to a really good level. But when we didn't have any fungicide applied, then BioFlex could significantly reduce the disease compared to non-treated. So this first blue bar that you see is non-treated, and the second one is BioFlex, which is kind of like a little bit more than half of the non-treated. So it was significantly improving, but not to a level that chemical fungicide was applied. And then for other treatments that was BioMD with nitrogen, then we had kind of like a different level of disease, but none of them were as good as that BioFlex, which is microbial inoculant with, I believe, 705 NPK fertilizer. Then for the quality, so the general trend was opposite to the disease. So when we had more disease, like we had less or worse quality, and then vice versa. So here in the fungicide applicated, we had less disease. So you can see the bars are a little bit taller, and means that the quality of the turfgrass was more, which makes sense. In terms of turfgrass color, we really did not see any significant differences between the treatments. And they were kind of in the same neighborhood with a little bit of a differences, especially in the non-treated with no fungicide, which was less than treated ones. So if I want to summarize this study that we did, so chemical management is more effective than when it comes only to biological control, but biological control and fertilizer combination can reduce brown patch. So I would recommend these type of techniques like biological control when you're dealing with less severe situation. Like if you have a little bit of a disease, then maybe really microbial inoculants where biological control could be enough and you really don't need to go to chemical applications. And then turfgrass quality was negatively correlated with brown patch, which we kind of know and expect to happen. So this is another study that was done back in 2019, and they wanted to see like what is different of the combination of multiple managements on brown patch. So they had nitrogen rating and time, fungicide application techniques, and simulated rainfall after fungicide application. So they wanted to see if rainfall can wash the fungicide and no effect on the disease control or not. So this is a role of urea or the nitrogen application timing and amount of brown patch. So you can see when they had like 1, 2, or 3 pounds of nitrogen per year, which was applied either in March, March and April, or March, April, and May. They had same level of the disease. So when you see these letters, like all of them are B, it means that they're not significantly different than each other. They're statistically the same, right? So, and then their non-treated control was also this letter B. So it means that like 1, 2, 3 pounds per year didn't really make a difference in terms of non-treated, so that they were kind of similar in the similar range. But then when they increased it to 4, 5, 6 pounds, then the disease increased. So the letters are different, but if you even look at the numbers are even higher. So when we talk about excessive nitrogen, this is what we are talking about, not just like a little bit of nitrogen, but when you go like really high on the dose that you're putting on your turf stem. So this is kind of the effect of simulated rainfall, which I believe they did 10-15 minutes after they sprayed their plots. Not much of a difference between like this is 2015 and this is 2016. So they replicated their study. And then this first bar here, which has the letter A, that's their control. And then like other bars are different fungicides that they tested. There was not really any difference in 2 years, except that non-treated had more disease, which makes sense. So they couldn't find any negative effect of simulated rainfall after application. And this is timing of the urea application. So they have like multiple treatments with different combinations. Like they have March, September, November, March, April, September, but all of them had 3 pounds per year. So there was no significant differences. As you can see, all the letters are A. They're numerically a little bit different than each other, but then it seems that the timing did not really make a difference when you have the amount fixed. So probably this doesn't really come to the practical part of it, but they checked different types of application equipment, like a backpacker sprayer or commercial spray wand, but they also didn't see any difference than the fact that they had less disease than non-treated. So if I want to summarize this study from NC State, so tall fescue can be fertilized with nitrogen during summer. It's just like you got to go with a modest level, not a high level. And when you have an appropriate fungicides for the management that you know it's effective and it works, then the delivery method, like the equipment that you use, probably is not going to make a much difference. Well, you got to keep in mind that you need a good coverage. And then simulated rainfall 15 minutes after application of the fungicide did not really change the outcome of disease management. All right, so this other study is a little bit back in 2013, which was on a large patch. Unfortunately, there is not much research done on like cultural practices of large patch more recently, so I had to go kind of back. And then, so they had like different cultivation techniques, like verticutting, irrigation, and then they had two timing to put nitrogen down, either summer or spring and fall. So in some cases, it wasn't something that they saw in all trials all the years, but in some cases, the application of nitrogen in fall and spring could make large patch a little bit worse. So like here, if we want to compare these two numbers with each other, so like in 2008 in summer, the number is numerically less than spring and fall. And that's what we talked about, right? We said like in the spring and fall, if you go with nitrogen applications, like excessive amounts, then disease is going to get worse. But that wasn't the case that they saw everywhere. Like here, like in 2010, when they got the rating in June 24, that wasn't really the case. So it wasn't consistent, but they saw it at some years in some locations. All right, let's switch gear and talk about gray leaf spot. So gray leaf spot produces spores, as we talked about it. And then the characteristics and the symptoms on the canopy or on the leaf is it starts with a very small purplish color lesions that, and by the time they get bigger and they get tan inside and with a darker brown border, but they're very smaller than what you see in brown patch. Some people, that's actually true. You see the fishhook tip of the leaves, which is one of the characteristics, but I always tell people do not, or something like this, like it gets to be like a hook. But don't consider that as the only symptom. Make sure that you always see the lesions before you confirm that as gray leaf spot. So this is a video that I got on perennial ryegrass. You see this leaf here that has like lesions on it. But then if you don't get to manage it on time, then the canopy turns kind of like a straw color, and then the whole canopy can die in a very short period of time. So favorable condition for this pathogen is when night temperatures go above 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and day temperatures is about like 80 to 90. High humidity, just very similar to many foliar pathogens, is one of the #1 keys. And this pathogen particularly needs leaf wetness for the spores to germinate. And then similar to brown patch, it doesn't like heavy nitrogen fertilization in the middle of the summer, so you want to avoid that. So back in 1990s, gray leaf spot was known as a major issue on perennial ryegrass, and that was the reason that many golf courses kind of started switching to bentgrass. Nowadays, it's kind of like on the side. It's not really known as one of the major issues when it comes to turfgrass. But again, like many people are reporting seeing seeing gray leaf spot on tall fescue. I got this image, or got the sample, I think it was last week on tall fescue, which was on a rough area of a golf course. And then I was like, this doesn't look like regular leaf spot. It looks like gray leaf spot. So I brought the samples to the lab, checked the spores, and I confirmed that it's gray leaf spot. So we are seeing more of gray leaf spot on tall fescue, like commonly. So if you want to tell apart like gray leaf spot and brown patch, these are how the lesions compare with each other. So this is on tall fescue, but very similar on warm season turf that I know you guys probably manage more often. So symptoms or lesions are like singular, kind of a spindle shape when it comes to gray leaf spot, but when it comes to brown patch, it's more like irregular shape, and then they can be bigger. It could be on the edge of the leaf or in the middle. And these are the spores that we see with gray leaf spots. They have a specific shape, like a water droplet. They can help us to tell apart from other leaf spots. So one thing that probably I mentioned before, but is the gray leaf spot can affect St. Augustine grass as one of its major hosts. So I included as a slide to do a comparison between gray leaf spot and leaf spot. So leaf spot pathogens can be different. They could be like Corfilaria, Bipolaris, you might have heard their name, but like symptom-wise on the canopy, they look kind of similar to gray leaf spot. I would say the general rule of thumb, but the lesions are a little bit more circular rather than like a spindle. But probably the most accurate way to tell them apart is just check the spores under the microscope. So the shape of the spores are different. Most of the time, their management is similar. You just got to make sure that you check the label for the fungicide if you get to a point that you want to spray, that the fungicide is effective for both leaf spots and gray leaf spot if you don't have a correct confirmation which one it is. So the thing is, like with leaf spots, most of the time there are saprophytes, and that means that when turf gets stressed or weak, they kind of come and take over on the dead tissue. So they're not actually causing the diseases, they're just there. So most of the time with leaf spots, especially in landscape areas and lawn, you really don't need to spray any fungicides. And then the other difference is like you normally see leaf spots when it's cooler, like in the shoulder seasons, but with gray leaf spot, it likes hot and humid in the middle of the summer. And for leaf spots, you can get it on a very wide range of turf species, from Kentucky bluegrass to fescues, like tall fescue, fine fescue, perennial ryegrass, and well, also species that are planted for golf courses like creeping bentgrass or annual bluegrass. All right, so if you want to talk about management of gray leaf spot, probably one of number one to go is planting resistant cultivars. Since 1990s, there has been a lot of research on developing resistant cultivars, and right now you can find some of them that are very good. Something to keep in mind is your turf stand is going to be more susceptible when it's at the seedling stage. So the first like 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks is when you got to keep a very close eye on it, because there is the highest chance for it to get affected. So just going opposite of the favorable conditions, right? So high nitrogen application in the middle of the summer increases the disease. So you want to make sure that you don't go with a really high dose, like in July, August, September. Or if you want to do then, or if you really need to do applications, then a slow release source of nitrogen in the fall probably would be the recommendation if you're actively dealing with gray leaf spot. So similar to brown patch, you want to make sure that your canopy gets dry before the sun goes down. So deep infrequent watering is really suggested, and then probably reducing overhead irrigation because then the canopy gets to be too wet. So this is from the same publication that I talked about. I'm not going to go through this table, but I want you to know like some of the fungicides in the QI frag group or frag group 11, you might see like for the efficacy, you might see like 1 or 4. So 1 means very low efficacy and 4 means the highest efficacy. So you want it to be high. So for some fungicides like Heritage, you see like 1 and 4, and that means that the pathogen has developed resistance to some of the QI fungicides. Not all of the populations, but you might see resistant population to QIs. So for example, if you choose to go with like Heritage or a QI, you spray it, you're not seeing any effect, then think about maybe your population is resistant to QI. that's just something to keep in mind for this pathogen. So this is a photo that I took probably 3 weeks ago at our turf farm. So this is gray leaf spot fungicide trial that we had. And you can see that, look, some of these are non-treated and some of these are fungicide treated, some of these plots. But when the disease level is too high and the cultivar is very susceptible, then the whole turfgrass stand might die. So some of the fungicides are still holding up very well, but then again, this can happen in very short period of time. So from the time that we inoculated or artificially put the pathogen on the turf stand till this happened, it took about like less than 3 weeks. So this is a study that was done back in 2005, and this kind of shows how cultivar resistance is important. So, well, this is 2005. Some of these cultivars probably they were not commercialized back then or might not be planted anymore. But when the bar is smaller, it means the cultivar is less susceptible, so it's better. You want the bars to be smaller here. So you can see that cultivars can be very different in their response to the pathogen without any fungicide applications. So again, if you're renovating your area or if you're establishing a new area, always decide to go or try to go with resistant cultivars based on NTEP or National Turfgrass Evaluation Program, which is the results of multiple research programs across the US. Most of the cultural management research work for gray leaf spot has been done back in 1990s, early 2000, because it used to be an issue back then. And in this work, this was done late 1990s, and then they wanted to see what is the effect of mowing height and nitrogen level on gray leaf spot. So they had 2 mowing heights, 1.9, 6.4 centimeter, and then they had monthly application of nitrogen between April to August. So they had 0, which was no nitrogen was applied, 36.6 and 73.2 kilogram per hectare. So in both years, they repeated the study for 2 years, 98 and 99. They did not see any significant effect of mowing height, but the effect of nitrogen was significant. So when they had a highest nitrogen rate, they had more gray leaf spot. So that's the reason. And then this is not the only study that I have seen. There are multiple studies that show that when you go with a highest rate or a higher rate of nitrogen, then you have a better chance for gray leaf spot development. And that's the case for Pythium blight, for brown patch, and several other diseases. This is kind of a different type of a study than usual cultural practices that we do. It was done at Penn State in 2008, and then they had 2 soil types, combination of peat and sand mix, and also Hagerstown silt loam. And then they had a silicon source, which they wanted to see if there is a difference between them, Velista and calcium silicate. So gray leaf spot decreased when they had Velista, but the type of the soil was not really affecting the results. So it seems that some silicon sources can affect and manage gray leaf spot. I don't know like to what extent practitioners actually use this as a management practice, but it's something to keep in mind that there might be some innovative ways even when it comes to cultural practices. If I want to kind of summarize this talk, so you always need 3 or 4 factors for diseases to happen and become established in an issue. You got to have a susceptible host, a virulent pathogen, and favorable environment for a required period of time, depending on the pathogen that you're dealing with. Brown patch and large patch, they're caused by the same species of the pathogen, but they are very different. Some of the cultural practices are the same for both, but some things like the type of the fungicide that you choose might be really different, or the timing of the fungicide application is definitely different. Gray leaf spot is a significant issue on cool season, warm season turf. At this point of the time, it might not be a major issue everywhere, but it's always something to keep an eye on because it's a very adaptive pathogen to multiple hosts, and it can always, it seems to be able to find a new host species. So the results of multiple research that I just talked about or the ones that we do at our turf pathology program, shows that cultural practices and fertilizations are important in management of the diseases. They might not be as effective as chemical fungicide applications, but when you have a lower level of the disease, they can definitely come handy. The question that I always ask is, do you really need to do chemical applications? Have you done all the cultural practices that are recommended? If you didn't get a good results, then yes, go ahead and do a chemical management. But especially when it comes to landscape and lawn, always give it a little bit of a time, patience, and cultural practices. Biological control, definitely. And then if you're not getting the result that you need, then you can go with chemical management. I know when it comes to practitioners, they deal with a lot of other factors. They have clients. Sometimes they cannot really wait. So it's easier to say than do, to wait and see how cultural practices work and then go with chemical. But then these are the moving parts that you got to keep in mind when you want to choose chemical applications or not. But probably the best practice is integrated disease management. So a combination of biological, cultural, mechanical, and chemical together. All right, with that, I'm done. And then if there are any questions, I will be happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Angel. So now this is the time for any of the questions you have. You can use the Q&A box there and type your questions, and I can read it for Angel and she can answer it. So while we are waiting for the questions, what is the main project or major project that you're working right now? Something
Sure. So when it comes to extension, we work on fungicide or chemical management, like fungicide trials, of gray leaf spot, brown patch, and dark spot. But when it comes to our research program, we only work on dark spot and brown patch. So we work on different aspects of them. So for example, one of the studies that we have right now, we are really excited about, is that we are trying to use UVC on autonomous mowers to see if we can manage dark spot. But so far, the results have been really good. We are in the field right now, dealing with a lot of Mother Nature type of stuff, but results have been seeming to be like really promising. We also use like machine learning and AI practices to identify turfgrass diseases or nematodes that affect turfgrass. So we go kind of more on the basic side on our research and on the applied side when it comes to our extension.
Great. Great. Yeah, I'm still waiting for questions. So
Well, that means two things. Either it was really clear or it was not clear at all.
it was clear, I bet. In your introduction, you was talking about some genetic aspects of host resistance you indicated. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. So those projects are more like collaborative projects with a turf breeder in the US. So unfortunately, we do not have a turf breeder at the University of Maryland. But right now I'm working with Penn State, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma breeders. And we have different panels from them, like Bermuda grass, zoysia grass, and creeping band grass. And we are, those are Genome-Wide association panels. And we are testing them, either some of them in the field, some of them in the greenhouse, to see what is the response of different genotypes to large patch or to dark spot. So for creeping band grass, we work on dark spot, and for the warm season ones on large patch. We are getting data on zoysia, and then hopefully we should have like some analysis done in the next year or so.
That's great. Okay, let me look at, we still don't have any questions. So, if you have any questions, please use that Q&A box. And
I think there was a question coming up.
Oh yeah, I saw one here.
It came up? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So I can read that question for you.
Sure.
So it's concerning the St. Augustine grass and controlling GLS. Is it realistic to have 5, 6, 7 fungicide applications or more throughout the summer?
That's a very good question. I would say this really depends on the year that you're dealing, or we are getting like a gray leaf spot. Like for example, this year we were a little bit delayed to get gray leaf spot. Well, for us on cool season, but that's the same case for warm season. Like for example, if you get it like probably early to mid-July, all the way through September, October, probably you're gonna need like 4 or 5 applications. But some years gray leaf spot happens like earlier, then in that case you might have to go up to 6 or 7. So I would say for us in Maryland, a sweet spot to start is late June. So you can be sure that it's really unlikely for a gray leaf spot to happen before then. But for you guys, you're a little bit more towards south, so you might get it a little bit earlier than us. So I would say if you start like the spraying probably early to mid-June, and then continue with like, depending on the fungicide, every 2 weeks or 3 weeks applications, then probably you're going to end up with that number. Yeah, it's not really far away from being real. So something that I think is kind of related to this, which kind of, I mean, it doesn't help to tell 100%, but it helps to anticipate gray leaf spot. So the theory is the spores come with the storms from southern part of the country. So for example, if there is like a storm with rain and everything coming up from Florida, then you can kind of see the pattern and then see how quickly it's going to get to you and kind of expect for the spores to arrive. Sometimes they don't. Like this year, we had multiple like storms coming down from southern part of the country, but none of them actually brought gray leaf spot. But then that's just something to keep in mind that might happen.
Great. Okay, I'm looking at the time. Yeah, thank you so much for your
Definitely.
excellent talk. I really learned a lot.